To please Allah, a chance to gain reward. I will spend on you, he says, all who spend in good cause. Good deeds are opportunities, sparkling bright and true, raising you in the sight of Allah and adorning Al-Jannah for you. So rush to earn his reward. Don't forget the oppressed. And when you go to sleep at night.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillahi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters. Welcome to another episode, A Time to Please Allah, live from Dubai. And we are live every Thursday, 8 p.m. and Dubai time, UAE time, and 7 p.m. KSA time. Inshallah, we hope that you're tuning in with us and you're letting your family, friends, everyone know about A Time to Please Allah. And you can check our Facebook page, A Time to Please Allah, as well as the YouTube videos of the previous recordings. Alhamdulillah, if you missed any of the episodes, you can try to review this, inshallah. I hope that everyone is doing well, alhamdulillah, and it's been a very eventful month, I would say, in the world, with a lot of things happening, subhanallah. And just today, but before I speak about it, I would like to introduce our co-host, alhamdulillah, brother. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good, how are you doing?
Thanks for being on the show with us again, mashallah.
It's my pleasure, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
And today I was reading a post on Facebook. There was a sister who was saying that there was a drive-by shooting by her house. And you know, some places in the States, I guess you can have your own, you know, she's like, this is the first time I actually pulled out my weapon out of her cupboard, you know, whatever they have, you know, locked, right? And, but she said that they were screaming at her, you know, like, go back home, or, you know, or die or something like that, you know.
So they shot at her?
They shot at her house,
oh,
yeah.
Okay, I thought, oh.
And they said, you know, go back to your country or something like that, basically. And obviously, it's, you know, events and you know, of Islamophobia are something that are taking place more and more these days, and especially with what's going on in the world today. There's a lot of issues, and people, you know, I saw today a sign, someone's holding a sign saying, no Allah in USA, or something like that, I don't know, or no Allah in America, right? And some people were pointing out, they're like, well, there's, you know, you're saying basically there's, you know, no God in the USA or something. We all know that people don't like God in the USA anyway, in general, right?
Yeah.
and I mean, the whole, you know, separation between state and religion, and lots of history behind that, okay? But the reality is that there's always been attacks and critics, you know, attacking Islam. It's nothing new, actually. It didn't start with Islam, as per us, you know, the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It was for the previous prophets as well. They were always criticized, and people always had to say something. And it's almost like, I've been watching some current news, and it's almost like when someone cannot have a proper articulated argument, and even that they might at the beginning, they start like that, but when they see that they have nothing to, you know, go on, then they'll be like, but this happened, but Islam says this, but you know, you guys did that. You know, I mean, it just becomes like an emotional, you know, shock, you know, like people basically shocking the audience, you know, which is a fallacy, and basically saying, oh, the Muslims, don't you guys blow up yourselves, or don't you guys rape women, or don't you guys do this, or don't. And and basically that's what we want to talk about in this show, is that how can we as Muslims respond to critics, respond to people. And of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about it in the Quran quite a few times. There's a few ayats that discuss from a certain different angle of how to deal with some of these people, okay, in certain cases, and about the Ibadur Rahman. To some people just say, like, you know, pretty much like peace out, you know. And then there are, in some cases, that you respond or you say certain things. In certain cases, you are careful that you don't insult, for example, the idols, that they will insult, you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without having knowledge. So there's, you know, there needs to be a proper analysis of how we would be able to respond, or for someone who can respond, or should they respond, or all these things. But basically, this is what we want to talk about today, and I want to go back a bit. I was doing a little research on the first time they translated the Quran in a different language, and obviously the first translation was in Latin, okay, and the word that they used for Allah was a word that basically means idol, an idol, right? So they didn't put something that would signify like a deity or God or the creator or something like that. It was basically something that the people termed as oh, it's an idol. So anyone who would read that or go through it, that basically have this conception that these people are worshiping an idol, which is obviously a very hypocritical, or that was because, or as you would say, because those same people, being Christians and Catholics at the time specifically, they were worshiping idols, statues, and so on. But that twist, and I was watching a video of a person speaking about Islam, and I don't want to publicize the name so people will go and look at it, but basically it was about 20 minutes of just him quoting certain things from the Quran, Hadith, him just rambling over, saying things. And then I stood there, I'm like, for me to respond to this guy, it would probably take me about a 2-hour video. For his 20 minutes, for me to actually respond to this guy, and for to explain to people that, hey, this is what the verse is, here's the context, here's this, yes, this is it, maybe this is not it, this guy's lying here, okay, maybe he's right here, but he's misinterpreting. It will take about 2 hours, and just I felt, I was like, subhanAllah, it's not easy to deal with this issue. Any input on?
Yeah, first of all, when you talk about defending the deen, we have to establish a base, and I guess I got ahead of myself. Each Muslim needs to have established a base in the deen before he can set out to defend the deen.
No doubt.
Okay. So a lot of times you'll run into situations where you'll have well-intentioned Muslims who are trying to defend the deen, but they themselves are lacking even a basic understanding of the deen, our basic creed, our aqidah, our belief. And this is something we've kind of visited this topic in the past several weeks. So a lot of times this is lacking, and they're out there trying to defend it, their own understanding, they have misconceptions in and of themselves because they haven't taken the time to really create that strong foundation in the religion, the understanding, so that they can defeat this. And so there's many stories, particularly more recently, and I mean the last couple hundred years, where missionaries have went to various countries around the world, and they've went to lay people, okay, and they've started basically proselytizing, spreading Christianity or whatever religion it may have been, usually Christianity, and the people have started converting because they had no way to counter the arguments that were being put forth to them, because they lacked themselves an understanding of their own religion. And this continued until, subhanAllah, Allah raised up a person who with some knowledge who could respond to them, and so then he basically saved a disaster, there's so many people who would have converted.
What you're saying is so important, because what I've noticed is, even today, we live in a world of information, and people can, there's so many people who are lacking ignorance, who are ignorant and are lacking knowledge, and specifically when it comes to these people working and criticizing Islam and attacking Islam, it's very easy to say something, accuse someone of something, It's very easy. And as I said, it's very difficult to respond. And these people, subhanAllah, I've seen recently some videos, and these are true. I've been working in this field for a long time, responding to missionaries, responding to critics. And it's basically people go around and they'll use, they'll take the masses, of lame people, poor people, and so on, and use terms that are familiar to them, such as Allah and this and that, and then they'll throw their spin on that, and then basically make them, convert them to, what. And actually, sometimes a lot of these people don't even know they're converting. They'll start doing shirk and all these things because it's already fitting with some of the misguided practices they're already doing because of lack of knowledge. So they're saying, well, like, it's not too far from what we're already doing anyway, and let's keep going on with that, and we're getting some benefit.
And you started talking about the West, and obviously, we also need to kind of examine the different ways people attack the deen. So you have those people who will, do a drive-by shooting.
Right.
Okay, that's one. We'll kind of set that aside. Right. But then you'll have what I would argue is a more dangerous and more devious method, which is generally employed by what you would term as Orientalists or your interfaith people, right? What they're basically, the message they're propagating, and a lot of Muslims have been swindled by this, is that all of the religions are correct, right? They're all going to lead you to Jannah, when we in fact know, as Allah said, Inna ad-deena inda Allah al-Islam, that the only way, the only deen with Allah is Islam. That's the only one that is acceptable to Him. But they are trying, now of course the ayah is right there. The ayah is right there in the 3rd chapter of the Quran, okay? But the people either don't bother to read, or they don't understand, or they don't even understand the meanings of the Quran. So when they are faced with a situation like this, where a guy comes up and says, well, I appreciate your religion, but you should appreciate my religion. It sounds kind of nice. It sounds like, we should all kind of get along, maybe hold hands and sing Kumbaya. But the fact is that our religion teaches us something very clear, that there is only one thing that is acceptable to Allah, and that is Islam. And everything else is misguidance. So because you're lacking that basic understanding of what will lead you to Jannah and what will not, then you're not able to handle this situation correctly. So,
no doubt that going back to what I said at the beginning, that we live in a world of information, a global village, right? And access to knowledge is quite easy. And to be honest, I was shocked to know the amount of work and resources that the non-Muslims are putting at attacking the Muslim. And let's break the silence. Let's not be strange that the recent the recent cartoons that were drawn, this is part of the greater picture, to attack Islam, to debase Islam, to make Islam as something evil and basically. And subhanAllah, this is nothing new, by the way. This is nothing new. There have been previous criticisms and so on of Islam, of the Prophet ﷺ. The popes of old used to really criticize Islam a lot. We have Dante's Inferno, which something that that's a whole different. I don't want to get into that too much, but that was it's something totally that has attacked Islam and has made fun of Islam. We have the likes of Salman Rushdie and others who have really taken upon themselves to attack Islam, and coming from a non-Muslim background, right, and always believing to some extent that we have to be intellectually honest when we talk about anything, right? About anything. And I've seen a lot of criticism, and I believe even till today that if someone sincerely takes up the Quran and tries to at least go there, read it, understand it, studies about the life of the Prophet ﷺ, studies about his example, about the Prophet, about how Islam links from Adam all the way to the Prophet ﷺ. I don't believe anyone would ever come to these conclusions that these people are spitting out there. So there's a few things though. Number one, these people are obviously have a microphone and they can speak, and they have a platform which is being propagated and is being funded over and over again. These are a minority, right? And of course the majority is kind of sitting around saying like, oh, this person's qualified, he looks like he knows what he's talking about. Of course, with technology, they can make and twist around things and incite people to believe that, hey, what, it's on TV. Of course, it must be right. This channel is saying it and that channel is saying it. So, oh, come on, it's news. Look at it. It must be right. So people, the general, mass of people are kind of sitting around. They're saying like, well, I guess we believe that, and you'll find out that it has trickle down into the lane people. You find colleagues of yours, people that we know, sometimes Muslims that are friends of ours or we work with, will come up with these kind of ideas and say, oh, didn't Islam do this, or doesn't Islam do that, or under, you know, Sharia law this would happen, or, you know, that would happen, and is this, you know, in line with human rights, and is this in line with democracy and all these things, right? So you're sitting there in your office or whatever work, and you're like, isn't your name like Muhammad? And you're asking these things, you know, is your name Ahmed? And then, you know, Bob will come and join in, and, you know, John, and, you know, and Stacy or something. I'm like, and everyone knows something about Islam, you know, and everyone's an expert on Islam from YouTube and Fox News and whatnot, you know. So, and then the Muslim sitting there, and he's just getting hits, you know, and just like, boom, boom, didn't this happen? Doesn't the Quran say that? In Surah 9 it says this, and in Surah, you know, 4 it says that, and the Muslims just like, you know, and the people get confused, right? So we're having, let's, you know, simplify things. There's an issue. There's a big issue. People are attacking Islam. They're criticizing Islam. They're coming from every single direction. It's not a secret. Starting from a government level all the way down to, you know, you know, the lame people now these days. But the more important thing that, I mean, we want to talk about today is how do we as Muslims react, starting from the scholar all the way till the lame person and so on.
Right. We have to differentiate also between the type of, and the term you're using is attacks, right? So we have some people who are drawing cartoons. They're just outright insulting the religion itself. We have other people who are wanting to have what you could call a theological debate on the validity of some points in Islam, or maybe all the points.
Right.
We don't have a problem with the latter. I'm more than happy to sit down with anyone and let's examine what Islam really says, and is that valid or not. You know, this is a discussion that Muslims should prepare themselves to have. But the other aspect, the former type of attack that I mentioned, which is basically insulting, denigrating, debasing the basic foundation of Islam, our basic beliefs. This is something that is completely different. This is something that we cannot tolerate. This is something that we do not accept, and this is a type of attack that, you know, as I mentioned, is just unacceptable. So we have to make a differentiation between these two types of efforts being made by the non-Muslims against Islam. You know, one is, while misguided, we can at least understand it, we can work with it, we can explain it, we can, you know, try to shed some light on it. The other one, the response to that can be only very limited because of the nature of the attack. So we have to make that difference.
We're going to take a short break, inshallah, right now, and we should be joined by Imam Ziaul Haq Sheikh, inshallah, who is the author of a book, Silencing the Critics, and he wrote basically on this and how to respond to some of these issues. And inshallah, we hope that he'll be joining us by teleconferencing, inshallah, after the break. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
A chance to gain reward I will spend on you, he says.
We can't just take knowledge and keep it as information. We have to transfer it into action. When he got up, he said one thing. Asalla nas, did the people pray? In Hajj, for example, the primary example of how multiculturalism really looks like. All equal. I've got a dentist in Canada. Even though he's ripping holes in my teeth, he's got great akhlaq. I love visiting him. Identify the issue. Analyze it. Challenge it. And then try again. Because if you fail, big deal. Try again and keep trying.
If I think I lost my ablution, but I'm not sure, do I have to make wudu again? Is it allowed for Muslims to visit the graveyard, or is that shirk? Am I allowed to say Jum'ah Mubarak to someone? Can I get to know a sister before marriage? I have so many questions, and I feel that I've just reached a dead end. If only I could find someone trustworthy to answer my questions. Someone who speaks based on proof from the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet.
Time to please Allah, a chance to gain reward. I will spend on you.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome back, dear brothers and sisters. A time to please Allah. We want to remind you our number is on the screen. If you want to add to the conversation, inshallah, I'm sure there's a lot to talk about, and maybe we'll even have to extend it to more than one episode. And given the recent events that took place in the world with the depiction, the drawing of Prophet ﷺ, people pushing now for Islamophobia, there's a lot of events all over Europe and North America of people, reacting, and basically, obviously we know what happened, with the Charlie Hebdo attack and so on, but we now also know what's happening around the world, that Muslims are being attacked all over, people are discriminating against them, they are challenging them, they are attacking, they are insulting them, you name it. So we're basically asking the question is, how do we respond? How does the scholar, and then the imams, and then the lay people and student knowledge, what's the basically the rule, or is there any way to look at this? Is there a priority? How do we go about defending our deen, defending the honor of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And specifically here we're talking about intellectually, replying to these people and so on. And I believe I have with us online Imam Ziaul Haq Sheikh, who is an imam at the Islamic Center Irving in Texas. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
How are you, Sheikh?
Alhamdulillah, I'm doing good, Brother Gabriel. How are you?
Alhamdulillah. Thank you so much for taking time out to be with us. I know you have some meetings coming up, so we'll try to make it as short as possible, inshallah. And for those who might not know, Imam Ziaul Haq, mashallah, you can check him out online. And alhamdulillah, specifically, he wrote a book that's available on Amazon. It's called Silencing the Critics. And he deals with some of these issues, responding to some of the criticisms that people have laid forth in a very academic manner, in a very intellectual manner. So Imam Zia, can you please tell us a little bit about the book, first of all? And then the question that I have for you is that what we've been talking, Asif and I have been talking for the past 15 minutes or so, is how do we react, or how do we respond to some of these critics, starting from the very educated ones to just the lame people on the street, colleagues and so on, who insult Islam, or they have certain criticism that might be founded or not founded in Islam.
Yeah, well, the background of my book was basically that I used to go on online forums and talk to people online and make postings online on blogs and stuff like that. And it just got to such a point that the echo chamber of critics, it's so severe that you just cannot deal with every single one of them. So I just decided that I'm just going to put everything into a book, and if anybody has any questions, I'm just going to just refer them to my book, which has proved successful so far. Now, in terms of the people that you come across, there are different kinds. One is a person who is hardline and stubborn, and his mind is set, he's not going to listen to you, completely closed-minded, there's really nothing you can do about that person except for you just praying for him. And then there's a person who has criticisms, has questions which he feels are legitimate, and he is genuinely, or she is genuinely wanting to learn about the truth of what those concerns are and what those questions are. So they will approach a person and they will ask. These are the people that you can talk to and you can sit down with and you can reason with, okay? And that's the kind of person that you can basically target and try to change their mind about what they feel about Islam.
MashaAllah. Sheikh, so what kind of issues do you address in your books? Like what kind of topics do you deal with, for those who might not know?
Well, the same thing that comes up all the time, really. The issue of the age of Aisha radiallahu anha, her marriage, the issue of FGM, or female genital mutilation, the issue of honor killings, the issue of forced marriages, the issue of different verses of the Quran that are supposedly promoting terrorism, things of that nature that you've probably heard and read about on all these right-wing websites. That's what the book addresses.
MashaAllah. Okay, so again, if anyone wants to check the book out, it's on Amazon. And Sheikh, what about what we're asking basically? How do the scholars react? MashaAllah, for yourself, for example, you wrote a book, but how do the scholars, the high scholars, for example, react? How do the imams react? What's their position when it comes to people criticizing, or are there other responses being made? Are there people being vocal about it? What about just the normal people, maybe educated and so on, and then the ones below, the lame people? What are their roles when it comes to this picture? Because definitely all of us are running into these criticisms, be it at work, at school, or wherever it might be now, on TV, on YouTube. You see, just recently someone sent me a message of a Pakistani brother from Saudi who saw that video that I told you about, 20-minute video that would take me 2 hours to respond to, saying that because of this video he's considering to leave Islam. So it's, even now also I'm talking to one guy that he's also he's basically not sure about Islam because of some of these things. So, are we supposed to respond to them? Are we supposed to engage them? Who's supposed to engage them?
Well, that's the whole agenda behind these kinds of attacks, is to put doubt in the mind of the layperson who doesn't have the knowledge to respond, and he will just take those allegations at face value. So, for the layperson, I would suggest that you ask a scholar. For example, if somebody quotes a verse to you which says that you need to kill all the disbelievers, you need to go to ask a scholar, what does this verse mean? In which context was it revealed? Why was it revealed? Who's being addressed here? And does it apply now? And contextualize it and ask a scholar about the real meaning of it. The same with any other allegation, any other criticism, any other hadith which may be presented to you. For example, there was a hadith which was quoted by these non-Muslims about the Prophet ﷺ ordering somebody to go kill a Jew for something that he said against the Prophet ﷺ. Now, if you see that, and the quote was given as in Sirat Ibn Ishaq, which is a book of Sirah, somebody is going to say to you, well, the reference is there, the book is there. If I pull out the book of Sirat Ibn Ishaq, I will find it. But you need to understand, we all need to understand, that a book of Sirah is not the same as a book of Hadith. The validation of the Hadith in books of Sirah have not gone through the same scrutiny and the same tests that the books of Hadith have gone through. So somebody simply quoting to you how maybe, a lot of people might even know what Ibn Ishaq is. They might just think it's a book of Hadith or something. But because they see the reference, because they see that it's supposedly a Hadith, they flip out and they just think, well, maybe this is a hadith. But then if you take that same hadith, look for it in books of hadith, in riwayat which have been authenticated, you'll find out that the riwayah is either very weak or even fabricated. Mafhum. So this is what the challenge we're facing, is that lack of knowledge on our side, and also because of lack of knowledge, we lack in confidence, and because we lack in confidence, like you said, there's a very big chance of people even losing their faith because of these kinds of allegations.
Now, Sheikh Zia, this is Asif Salim. You talked about, you gave some examples basically dealing with people who are attacking the religion on a theological level. Maybe they're raising some questions about some specific points, and I think some of the topics you addressed in your book can be termed in this way as well. But obviously, the reason that we're having this discussion today is because of the recent, the recent occurrences, and maybe in the past several weeks. So, and I don't know if in the first segment we kind of divided the different types of attacks against the religion. We said some are theological, some are questioning some, the beliefs of Islam, and that we don't have a problem responding to these. But then there's a different type of attack where people are either getting violent, or they're just insulting the religion, they're attacking the character of the Prophet ﷺ in a very vile manner. So how should we respond to this latter type of attack?
I was actually mentioning this in a lecture I gave the other day. This is something that we need to learn from history. Remember that many different minorities that we see nowadays that have a lot of power and they have a lot of influence in the world, they went through the same kind of situations. Okay, in America we had the African American people that were subjugated and treated like animals, basically, and treated like property. At the end of slavery, they still had to deal with segregation, and then there was a whole civil rights movement. And now, in this day and age, if you were to utter the N word in public, you are likely to lose your job because of it, because it's just not acceptable anymore. And the same thing happened in this country, and I'm talking about America specifically. And maybe it sounds like you have a British accent. The same thing happened to the Irish people that first came to the British mainland. The Irish people were joked about, and you've probably heard Irishman jokes like Englishman, Irishman, Scotsman, do X, Y, and Z, and then the Irishman, he's basically the butt of the joke, right? So the Irish people have the same thing in the UK. The Irish people have the same thing in America. The Catholics, when they came to America, they had to deal with these kinds of things. The Jewish people, they had to deal with these kinds of things, but their response was never violent. They fought for their rights, they fought for recognition in using civil disobedience, by using politics, by using the system that was already in place, and then changing the system to favor them. So the problem we have is that we jump the gun and we do things, or when I say we, some Muslims basically want to resort to violence for everything, okay? And it has a negative effect on the Muslim Ummah. It has a negative effect on the portrayal of Muslims. And basically we take one step forward and two steps back whenever this kind of thing happens. So what we need to understand is that there is a sensible way of going about things. There's a sensible way of negating these things. Let's go back to the issue of Salman Rushdie that was mentioned earlier in the program. Salman Rushdie was an author that nobody actually knew about. And his book, Satanic Verses, and his books prior to that were really not worth reading. I mean, they were not accepted he was not accepted as a very good author prior to that. But Muslims, when they heard about Satanic Verses, they publicized and publicized and publicized until his books actually became bestsellers, and he became a noted author for his work. After that, he started getting
he was
prizes
knighted
and
as
so
well.
on. So this, all this noise that people made actually negatively gave him a platform, and he became more famous and accepted by the mainstream because of that. So we need to weigh up our responses and do it in such a way that it doesn't have a negative effect on, first of all, the Muslim Ummah, and it doesn't have a negative effect in terms of what we're trying to achieve. And the best way to do that is to understand how the system works in your country and work within that system and get recognition by the society in general by working hard to be recognized, civic engagement, volunteering, doing good deeds, and being a part of the community that you're in, and also getting involved in politics. I mean, we still have this issue that people throw around, is it permissible to vote in elections or not? So, whereas the only way really that you can change systems in the West are through the systems that are already in place. And, if you don't want to get involved, then nobody's going to listen to you. Politicians are not going to listen to you, and you're not going to have a voice in society. So we need to be a little bit more sensible when it comes to dealing with these issues.
Sheikh, sorry, just to kind of ask you one more question. It seems though that there's a history of Muslims in the West getting involved in some of these things, and it still seems like, people still don't understand that there's a certain amount, a few Muslims who might do something that might be violent, and then there's the overwhelming majority who are law-abiding citizens and doing all the good things and volunteering and doing all these nice things for the community and drives and food drives and all that. And somehow still the critics, when these people are, they won't say that look, these Muslims are so good, and they'll say, no, all you Muslims are all the same in the end, So I mean, it seems that subhanAllah that still, people don't get the issue, and they still believe that in the end, anyone will do anything. All the Muslims are the same. It doesn't matter. So no matter how much it seems how hard we try to please the people and to show a good image and to help and to be good citizens, that these guys are still not happy, and any spark that can
Yeah, well, you have to understand that this is not really our fault. There's a huge funding behind these Islamophobes. There are millions and millions of dollars being donated to these organizations like Act for America and people like Pamela Geller and Robert Spencer. These people are getting huge donations from people like the Clarion Fund and millionaires that basically want to put Islam down. So with all this exposure and all this advertising that they can do, they really have the upper hand. We are stuck in, doing things which are not productive, counterproductive even sometimes, because we are not understanding what the need is. In our communities, our children are either trying to become engineers or doctors, whereas the Ummah needs journalists now. It needs people that are working in mass media and people that are willing to write blogs and know how to work social media. Because of our lack of understanding in how these things are done, we are falling behind, and because of the massive funding that this propaganda machine has, we basically have a hard time competing with them.
Okay, thank you so much, Imam Ziaul Haq, Sheikh, Jazakallah khair. And again, to the brothers and sisters watching, you can check out the book on Amazon, again, Silencing the Critics, and we hope to have you back on our show, inshallah, in the future. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah. Wa alaikum salam.
A lot of things were said, subhanAllah, and definitely, some really good points. Now, one of the things I'd like to add, though, yes, the Ummah needs journalists and needs bloggers and these people obviously who are in line and can do these things. But at the same time, those same people, of course, I'm sure he would agree with that, need to be well grounded in the deen. And I want to kind of like personalize this maybe a bit. When I became Muslim, I remember my colleagues from school, my high school colleagues. I was going to a Catholic school prior to that. And I was, first university I became Muslim. So some of my old colleagues, Arab Christians, called me on the phone. They're like, "What are you doing? You're becoming Muslim." They started attacking me, saying things from the Quran that obviously I'm just, I embrace Islam because from the research I've done, the history, and the aqidah that I've realized that this is the truth, that Allah is one, Tawheed. So they started telling me things, and I remember that I said, I wasn't confused necessarily, but shocked, And I said, listen, I don't know any of these things, but I need to study. So I started looking at some of the things that they said. And I remember that within 2 years or so, I became so well versed in interfaith, dialogues, watching the videos, studying the books. I spent so much time, because even till today, I have a Bible, which is in my office at home, with bookmarks, with almost every single verse that they attack that is always in the Bible, for example, or something like that, Almost every single verse that they have, the double standards and marking, and I color-coded it, and I spent so much time, and I looked at the theology, and I learned things about history that even before, as a Christian, I didn't know. And then in the end, I said, it didn't help me that much. Mm-hmm. I could reply to these people, but the confusion was just growing, because I knew Christianity better than I knew Islam. Right. At the same time, people will get to know politics and things better that they'll know their deen. Right. So, definitely people should be involved in interfaith things, but you'll find that people who are interfaith, it'll be like, again, let's, hold hands together. And I remember very well from an interfaith dialogue that I attended to, that in the end, the Christian turned to the Muslim, be like, wow, we have so many things in common. Right. You guys should just be Christian. You're like, you're so close. Right. And that's what everyone took at the end. The guy didn't talk about anything different. It was just about it's so calm, we're so calm. And in the end, the guy just put on him, like, you guys should just be Christian. And all the Christians were clapping and hallelujah. And the Muslims sitting there dumb, like, what the heck are we doing? So it's important for us to know our deen. And it was only when I started going back to traditional studies, to study Aqidah, to study Hadith, to understand Mustalah al-Hadith, as the Shaykh was talking about, I, at the beginning, people would give, the Hadith books or Ibn Ishaq, which is very, the Orientals, they love Ibn Hisham and Ibn Ishaq, they love them. Okay, At-Tabari, they love it. And we can talk about it in a different show as to what the issues are there, but they love it. And, Muslims don't know that. If you tell them, oh, this is from your book, and their experts are given the perfect citation according to MLA or APA or something. It's page number, volume, and you name it, and subhanallah. So till I was able to go back and start studying properly and understand my Islam, that is when I solved the problems that were in my mind. And I believe that most of the people are in the same situation. People are confused. People have left Islam.
Yeah, and I think this also, we have even a bigger problem than this, because fortunately for you, you had these problems in your head, or these questions in your head that remained unanswered. Unfortunately, a lot of people now, and this is what we've kind of visited the past couple of weeks, the people don't have the correct information to answer these questions, but they still go ahead and answer those questions the best way they can according to the knowledge they have, which is incomplete or maybe even incorrect.
Yeah.
So of course the conclusion they arrive at is also wrong.
Right.
And then they go off blogging about that conclusion, and they basically end up spreading more misinformation than actually refuting the misinformation.
Right.
So they actually add to the problem more than anything else. So you'll see a lot. There's so many, but you come across blogs and things that are addressing some of these issues that the Shaykh mentioned, and they're muddying up the waters even more.
And one of the things that I want to mention at the same time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes some of the believers that they're not afraid of the blame of the blamers. And this is something that I believe that has to be addressed, because living in a society, in a global village, where a system that really opposes Islam is above you, right? Definitely these impulses are gonna pressure you to basically mold yourself accordingly, like pretty much get in line with everyone else. What's going on? You're like the Baba Black Sheep. You're standing out of everyone. You're being a rebel. You're being this and this. Can't you get educated? Can't you get civilized with the rest of the world? Meaning, you Muslims should change your deen. You should, okay, stay Muhammad, stay Ahmed, go pray 5 times a day, but reform your religion. We've all done it. Come on, get in line. We're in 21st century. You find Muslims saying this, that it's time, and I quoted recently, inshallah, will publish an article, and I've looked at, some of the Muslims are saying that it is up to Muslims themselves to start this reform. It is up to scholars and educated Muslims to basically start what the Christians have started before, the Reformation. Right?
Reinterpreting the
text,
Quran, right?
reinterpreting the Quran. Everyone else got it wrong. Yes, the Prophet ﷺ said this, but it was back then.
Right.
This is not really it now. We are living in the 21st century. Starting from very basic things such as the hijab. There's no need for hijab. You are in a free society. Back then, it was covering you from the sun and this and that. And now it's different. We live in a free society. You're not, there's police, there's this. No one's going to bother you or anything like that. I mean, people are given all these rational so-called explanations, which are totally rational, no doubt. And they are basically pushing and pressuring the Muslims to basically say, like, you know what? I guess we need to step up. We need to be in line. And subhanAllah, that is so important because it's, we're basically ashamed of our deen in the end. We don't have the guts to stand up strong and say, this is our deen. This is what the Prophet ﷺ said. We have wisdom and we can definitely, have a way of going about things, but we're not going to change our deen.
Nor are we going to say that something that the Prophet ﷺ said or did is not applicable to now.
And this is what I think we need to call our ulama and our scholars and our intellectuals to be able to stand strong and respond intellectually, and alhamdulillah, there are some, alhamdulillah, as we saw, there are some people who are basically standing up and they're saying, no, this is our deen, and look at this, and look at that, and watch the double standard. And they're basically standing, and they're not saying, well, no, you don't understand, it's not like, they're basically standing strong. They're saying, this is our deen, this is what the Quran says, no doubt. Yes, we're, and they're teaching the people as opposed to just apology. I always reject the word apologetics in Islam. I don't believe this exists, apologetics. Apologetics means you're basically, in the term, it means basically that, you're basically responding to questions and so on. But really, the way, starting from apologize, apologetics, it's like you're basically kind of like, well, I need to kind of please you with some kind of an answer. You have a question, and the answer that I have to give you has to be some kind of a puzzled answer that will satisfy you to believe that I'm okay, I'm like you, And this is something that I don't believe that should exist in Islam. The scholars for centuries have stood strong and have replied to people. Alhamdulillah, if we study the history of Islam, this is not the first time the Muslims have been attacked.
Yes.
In an intellectual level. And the scholars debated. And we have the likes of many of the scholars, ulama, Imam Bukhari and Imam Abu Hanifa, who was a very, very great debater with many different religions. The Prophet Muhammad himself, with the Christians of Najran when they came from Yemen, a big debate, and subhanAllah. And a lot of the Sahaba and the Tabi'in and the Tabi'in, the scholars have stood up. And subhanAllah, Islam was at the peak of intellectual, it just flourished, and people just basically, they're below it.
And we're not saying that every person should go out there and start debating. So I want to make sure that this point is very clear. I think the story that you gave about yourself is very apt and very applicable to most of us people, of us lay people, I guess. We need to go back and understand our religion from its sources, from the correct sources, from the correct understanding. Not, I'm just going to go sit with the Mus'haf in an interpretation of the Quran, and I'm just going to read it, and just whatever I take from it, now I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go out and hit the streets. This is exactly what we don't need. Or now they don't hit the streets, they hit the blogs, they hit the internet, they start posting things. And so This is not what we need. We need people who go back and study their religion from its correct sources. They study the sciences of hadith and fiqh and Quran and tafsir and all of these things, right? And of course, aqidah first and foremost. Then they can go to that next step, right? But we don't need to go out of order here. It's very critical. First, you need to make sure that you are taking care of yourself. A lot of times, an example we used to always give is people are going out wanting to debate about something in Islam and they don't know how to recite the Fatiha correctly. Right. You know, so let's get the order of things correctly, the priorities. You know, first you have to take care of yourself, make sure that you're praying correctly, make sure that you know how to make wudu correctly, just those basics, you know. And then of course make sure, even before that, make sure your beliefs are correct. Make sure you know what the arkan al-iman are. Make sure you know what the different the three different types of tawheed are and what they mean, and the asma and the sifat and all of these things. Make sure this is all set, these basics are there. Then we can move to the next level of reaching out to the people, either to make da'wah or to respond to the attacks.
And when that is strong, subhanAllah, it's a fortress, even though you might not have the interfaith knowledge, but at least your iman will not be affected, even if you don't know how to answer, and you might be able to say, I don't know.
Well, and you'll also, if you have a good understanding of your deen, you will be able to at least respond to the attacks that are made on your deen. You might not be able to show the inconsistencies and contradictions in other religions, but you will be at least be able to defend yours.
Your own.
And that's probably more important than the former.
Jazakumullah khair. Inshallah, we're running out of time. I think we might have to do another second edition, of this, or maybe how to, more advice on how to go about, answering to certain things and so on, and maybe have a little bit more discussion around this area of seeking knowledge and how to go about it in terms of related to this specific topic of responding to the critics, and definitely we need to engage more of some of the current events, inshallah. So I think we have to do a second episode. For now, we're running out of time. Inshallah, check out our Facebook page, A Time to Please Allah, and the recording. If you missed the show, you can go back and watch it. Inshallah, be posted probably by tomorrow or the day after, A Time to Please Allah. And subscribe to our page and share our page to your friends. Inshallah, we'll see you next Thursday at the same time, A Time to Please Allah, live from Dubai. This is your brother Gabriel Al-Romaani. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Time to please Allah, a chance to gain reward. I will spend on you, he says, all who spend in good cause. Good deeds are opportunities, sparkling bright and true, raising you in the sight of Allah and adorning Al-Jannah for you. So rush to earn his reward. Don't forget the